available, so I decided last minute to record it and post it on YouTube after the fact. I'll probably also do it again in person, for some folks. There's been a number of requests of people who weren't able to make it today due to other events about having this again. And it is early in the process, relatively speaking to everything. So, I do have handouts for the class.
Yes.
So what I'm handing out now is the current calendar of the Democratic primaries and caucuses in the country. I'll be getting back to this in a little bit, but this is the caveat is this is as it was earlier this week. States are still considering date changes. They're still considering, caucuses can move because they are party run, can move on pretty short notice. So thank you all for coming. For those of you who don't know me personally, my name is Matt Fruth. I'm a resident of Oak Park, former president of the Young Democrats of Illinois, former DNC representative for the Young Democrats of America, and a delegate to the 2012 convention. I had it easy because it was a re-election year and you didn't really have to, wasn't much effort in getting picked. I was under the age of 36, which meant I was a youth. I get to be the checkbox for youth as a youth delegate for the goals by the Democratic Party for inclusion. So that's a little bit about me. I'm a huge rules nerd. I'm a process nerd, and so I've been following the Democratic process about delegate selection for several years. Even before 2016, I was kind of following it along with that. And I was following very closely, relatively closely, the Unity Reform Commission, which was established after the 2016 primary with representatives from both the Hillary Clinton supporters and Bernie Sanders supporters to look at how delegates are picked, how the convention is run, how the party is organized, to kind of look at reforms. And there has been some changes, probably some of the biggest since the 80s, as to how we award delegates. So a couple of key things to remember. There's 3 big points I'd like to make that will come back occasionally. 15%, and I'll explain that, but that 15% is a big number. It's a small number, but it has a big impact in the primary process and the caucus process going forward. Any reference to gender equality, delegations are supposed to be evenly divided by gender, as well as the officers at the convention, is all based off self-identification of gender. That is repeated repeatedly throughout both the DNC and our state plans. But all gender, when I refer to gender, it is all by self-identification of the person. And thirdly, at each step of the process, the congressional district level and the state party selection level, the candidates get to review and approve all delegates who will represent them at the convention. And that is going to be a big part, because the long and the short of it is you need to be, the candidate and their campaign needs to be confident that you will represent them well at the convention if you are going to be a delegate. And if they don't feel like you are with them and you're going to represent them well, like not throw an egg at somebody on the convention floor, they're not gonna pick you.
So,
yes.
Did you say that's Illinois only, or?
That's everywhere.
Okay.
It's part of the DNC framework.
Okay.
So, convention overview. It's in Milwaukee. Just a stone's throw across the Cheddar Curtain. It's July 13th through 16th. And what will happen is, traditionally, the party out of power in the White House holds their convention first. Then the Summer Olympics happen. Then the party with the convention, with the party that's in power in the White House has their convention. The Republicans are in August. I believe the Olympics start about the 23rd of July. So this is a Monday through a Thursday for us up in Milwaukee. Now, at the convention, basically, all the delegates get together and vote to have a nominee. What does it take? It takes a majority of the delegates. Now, there are two kinds of delegates. There are pledged delegates, and there's automatic delegates, otherwise known as the boogeymen and women of the Democratic Party superdelegates. Now, there will be 4,533 potential delegates at the convention in Milwaukee. Of that, only 765 are superdelegates, which is 765 are automatic or superdelegates. That is less than 17% of all of the delegates at the convention, which means 83% are pledged. 83% of the delegates walking into the convention hall will be already decided. Likely all the superdelegates will probably be already decided too. But the pledged delegates will have committed at some point, well before the convention, this is who they're going to vote for, at least through the first two ballots. Of all of the delegates, 2,437 are elected or selected at the congressional district level, which means they are directly elected by us, which is 53.8%. So a majority of the delegates at the convention are directly elected by Democratic voters or caucus goers. All of the rest are selected through another process. Whether it's the superdelegates, which there's a number of categories which qualifies for that, I'll cover that in a moment. So at the state level, the pledged delegates are our congressional district. There's party leader and elected official, and there are at-large. Illinois gets 184 delegates altogether, and 101 are at the congressional district level.
Meaning voted on by voters.
Yes. And those are partitioned out based off of a formula of how well your congressional district voted for previous presidential candidates, how many people live in your congressional district, Democratic voters are in your district, so it's weighted. Downstate doesn't get as many delegates as the Chicago area because there's more Democratic voters in the Chicago area. Now, yes?
I was in the only Republican ward in Chicago.
Well, it's based off congressional district, so you benefit from that. So just because it's in your
How about state house?
no, it's based. I have a chart I can show you later.
Okay.
Yeah. Now the superdelegates are broken off by a number of categories. Now they include our DNC members, of which we have several from Illinois representing us at the Democratic Party nationally, members of the U.S. House and Senate, are any current and former presidents of the United States. I think we have one in Illinois. Our Democratic governor, former DNC chairs, former speakers of the House, former majority leaders, minority leaders of the Senate. Yes?
That's the people who are incarcerated?
I can't answer you that question. Probably not. So, Illinois has, believe, I'll refer to my packet memo later, but it's 29 super delegates out of Illinois. That includes all of our House members, both of our senators, our governor, and others. And so they get to pick their candidate at any point in the process. And I know there was a lot of debate after the last primary as to what their role is. And my defense, I always open with 2 words: John Edwards. I know so many people who were pledged delegates for John Edwards who, had they known, wish they would have changed, wish they could have done it. Yes, it's good to have pledged delegates who, from the beginning, we know this is who I want to support and this is who I support. But I also feel that it's important for us to have, personally, I feel it's important for us to have members of our party who can walk into the convention and have the ability to change their mind off of information at the very last moment that comes up. Has that happened? Who's to say, because people generally don't talk about whether or not they change their mind, but they can. They have that ability, and I think that is good to have in the process. Because we'll find out how far, in a few minutes I'll cover, how far in advance you have to declare yourself as a pledged delegate. It's early. So, a little bit about how the convention happens. Fall of the midterm elections, the DNC puts out the call for the convention. It's a big document that says, here's kind of our big framework for how the convention is going to happen, how it's going to be organized. Cities tell us who would like to host us. Cities then submit bids with, here's the site we're going to have it, this convention center, here's the hotels that we have available to house the 4,533 delegates, plus campaign staff, plus press, plus volunteers, plus convention staff who will be on the ground for months planning and organizing and getting all the logistics in place. The DNC chair picks a spot. He picks the city. Then the DNC chair and the executive committee of the DNC, which is made up of the heads of certain caucuses and committees on the DNC, pick temporary chairs for the 3 major committees at the convention, which are rules, credentials, and platform. The DNC chair and secretary will act as kind of, until those officers are finalized, will act as the interim officers in a variety of ways. The convention chair alternates by gender. This was either a reform in the 60s or the 80s that it will alternate. The last chair was a woman, so this chair will be a man, as they self-identify. The convention will be called to order on Monday. There will be committee reports. Here's a temporary list of how many delegates are initially seated. Now this 4553 may go down. It's weird because of the reforms that the Unity Reform Commission put in place. It is possible that there will be technically possible that there will be less delegates than is initially established. So you get the committees present their reports. Those are usually approved before the cameras turn on in the evening, and the platform committee meets for several times leading up to the convention so that there's a printed bound document at the convention that they distribute to the entire convention. I still have mine from 2012, and it's sitting in a box in my basement. So because that's what happens, you get home from the convention and it goes in a box. I believe in the platform and what it can represent, but I also acknowledge that we almost never refer to it once the convention is over. It just is the reality of, we have our ideals, but the platform document itself is not a constant reference in most circles. So we have the convention, and then the convention gathers, reports from the committees are approved, we have our delegations, we have our platform, we have our rules for how we will operate said convention, and then we meet their speeches that are carefully and amazingly coordinated and produced. And then there's nomination speeches, there's the keynote speech, and then we vote. And then whoever is our nominee gives their acceptance speech. And then we all go home after the big balloon drop. Although probably not because of latex allergies. It's a reality.
They're bad for the environment.
And they are all, yes, and they are also bad. As I said, I was a delegate in 2012. And thinking back to it as I was thinking about this, the doors to the convention center opened about 2 o'clock. Speakers, people started addressing the podium at about 4, I think. I'm sorry, I keep looking back over here. Kitty Kurth and Kevin Lampy have worked many conventions as coordinating the speeches on the stage.
And the hardest part of the whole convention is getting those 4 people that have to give their reports so that you can start off the convention. The absolute hardest part is finding them.
Yeah, I believe it. As someone who has been a part of Young Democratic of America conventions, as someone who has given that one of those reports, I have been credentials chair for the Young Democrats National Convention. Yes, we are right. Like there have been years where we were writing it backstage before we get, making our final notes for the report right before we go on stage. So yes. So 4 o'clock speeches start. It is a variety of speakers, and then 6, 7 o'clock. TV coverage starts. So there are speakers who have been speaking well before TV cameras covered. It's probably on C-SPAN, it's probably streaming online somewhere, but it's well before TVs turn on. There are delegates like me who were sitting in our seats watching the speeches. And there are great ones that never made it on prime time, and there are not great ones that did make it on prime time. Just because. You never know how someone is just gonna knock it out of the park. 2 months before when they were starting to line up, and a month before when they were lining up speakers, how good someone was going to be, and it just lucks out that way. So, sort of the unofficial convention agenda as a delegate. This is based off my experience in 2012, and I've talked to a few folks who were delegates in 2016. You wake up every morning that you're there, and you go to your delegation breakfast, which is at your hotel, which in 2012, Illinois' delegation was about 3 blocks from the convention center by random draw. That's what they told us, and that's what I choose to believe. But some delegations had to take a bus from a hotel 30 minutes away, because there's just, when you're dealing with thousands of delegates, there's only so many hotel rooms close to the convention center. And in Milwaukee, it's going to be particularly challenged because my understanding of it, and I haven't looked at the full map, their hotels are much more spread out than the other potential sites that were up. I think it was Houston and somewhere in Florida, I can't remember, I think Tampa.
Miami Beach.
Miami, thank you. And definitely more spread out than Charlotte or Philadelphia was. So delegation breakfast, you get there's a nice continental breakfast, there's a buffet, you eat, speakers come in. We had speakers from the national AFL-CIO, auto workers, members of Congress from other states, members of the Obama administration came in and spoke from the Obama campaign, Illinois elected officials, our statewide officers. In Milwaukee, what's likely to be, because it is spread out, will be speakers from all of the candidates that are in contention for the nomination. It will not be 23 candidates by that point, but there will likely still be a few candidates with delegates on the floor who will be sending surrogates to these delegation breakfasts. You sit, have your food, drink your coffee, hear some speeches, then you collect your credentials for the day. And each day has a different credential, because who gets access to the convention center changes by the day. You get the best, there's staff credentials, there's convention staff credentials, there's political spheres. Delegate credentials gets you onto the floor all the time because you are a voting member of the convention. It is pretty great. And you get a different one each day. They're slightly different colors. Everybody, pretty much I talk to every other state they don't give it to you until after breakfast is done. And make sure you're there, and you're there representing your state, listening to the speakers. You pick up your credentials. It is now somewhere between 9 and 10 o'clock, and you have several hours to kill. There are programs put on by environmental groups. There are by the DNC, by the DCCC, the Congressional Committee, the Senate Committee. The various state parties will do events that show trainings, issue discussions, panel discussions. There are ways to fill your time, or you can just walk around the city. One of my favorite memories of in Charlotte was walking down the street, and in a half block, I got a chance to shake hands with Tom Brokaw, Chris Matthews, and Michael Steele. And then that was like the second day, morning, just walking down the street. Like they were just walking from like one TV camera segment to the next, or one thing to another, and just without any stat, So it's a crazy hectic time. You go to the convention hall. There's the convention program. There's the speeches. Everything else you go at the end of the day. The convention hall adjourns. Then there's receptions. There's parties after that. The Illinois delegation put one on. Kwame Raoul and the Black Caucus in Springfield threw one party. Dick Durbin threw a party in Denver. So there are places you can go afterwards that will go well into the evening, and they're amazing. It's a lot of fun. And then you go to bed for a couple hours, and you get back up and you do it all again the next day. It is an exhausting and thrilling experience, and if you have a chance to do it and you're willing to do it, I think it's great to see how all of it happens, because it's very clear that the notion that the Democratic Party is stale or not involved. When you're there on the ground, you see how many people are moving and working and dedicating to this. It couldn't be farther from the truth. The nomination process at the convention. We've gotten through all of it. The candidates submit a piece of paper declaring their intent to be a nominee. They include who's going to give their nominating speech, who's going to give the second, and they all turn it in. They also have to turn in a list of signatures from delegates as who's going to support them. There's the nomination speeches, then there's the vote, which some of us probably have remembered as a roll call vote. They run through state by state by state, announcing who their delegates are voting for. And the first round of this includes what I affectionately call is the state brag. If you go back and watch it, they go, the land of Lincoln, home of Dick Durbin, Abraham Lincoln, and they run through the litany of whoever is historically significant or who is presently elected. It's fun. It's a chance for them to speak about their state. I always feel bad for like Virginia, who almost never gets to, because we pretty much have the nominee well before. The good Commonwealth of Virginia. My friends from there would say. The delegations, the day of we start to vote, there's a roster that the delegation has with all the delegates' names. You sign next to your name, and you put a check mark of who you want your vote counted for. There are no secret ballots at any part of the delegate process aside from the primary. The convention is all open vote. There's no secret ballots at the convention. And at the state selections level in Springfield, which will happen after our March primary, it's all open vote as well. The only secret ballot in any part of this process is the March primary. States go in alphabetical order. there are 57 delegations. I should say it's not the state's vote. Each delegation is called in alphabetical order. There are 57, including American Samoa, Guam, the Northern Mariana Islands, the Virgin Islands, Washington, D.C., and Democrats abroad. And Puerto Rico, yes, thank you. And Democrats abroad. They will go and be read in alphabetical order. They will present their votes, and the convention secretary will record them. In the first round of voting, superdelegates will not vote unless a candidate has enough votes of pledged delegates to become the nominee. So if they hit that 50%, which I have written down somewhere, but not right now, in pledged delegates, if they can meet that in pledged delegates, 50% of that in pledged delegates, superdelegates get to vote in the first round. Otherwise, the first round of voting is just pledged delegates. If there is no nominee after the first round of voting, there will be a second ballot in which superdelegates can vote. And at that point, and then there will be rounds and rounds of voting until one candidate who is still receiving votes has 50% plus one. Then, now, some of you may remember in 2016, and this also happened in 2008. States can pass when they are called. I actually went back the other night and watched the 45 minutes of the roll call vote from 2008 because I wanted to make sure I had it right. I thought I had it in my mind, but I wanted to make sure it was right. So it's coordinated between at that point it was two. We were down to two in both cases. It was coordinated between the two campaigns to what the timing would be so that out of courtesy and custom, the person who would not be the nominee makes the final vote declaration from their state, and then moves to suspend the rules of the convention and have the nominee selected by acclamation. So in 2008, what happened was California passed just because they have so many delegates. So would you mind asking them if we can get the air turned?
Yeah, sure.
The temperature rolled down.
Okay.
Oh, sure.
I gotta go to the restroom. Well,
Come on. They're about 17 years old, so. So. Yes. So in 2008, we were rolling through the states. California passed because they have so many delegates, even though it was relatively split, it would have kind of thrown off the staging of what came later. Illinois passed when it came time for them. New Mexico, which would have put Obama over the top, yielded to Illinois, who did their state brag, who then yielded to New York. And the state party chair of New York did the introduction. Hillary Clinton then took the microphone and made the motion to accept by acclamation and voice vote Obama as the nominee. It's just suspend the rules and do that. So that it's a sign of unity, and it's good visuals for the people at home. But that's one of those things that in passing and yielding, giving that time to them, and it's all worked out ahead of time. That's not something they figured out on the fly. So now to the primary calendar. You will see there. So this is as the dates were as of earlier this week. They are, of course, subject to change going forward. But as we get closer, because laws have to get passed to move these dates, it is more and more likely that these will be the dates that they will be. The way that I formatted it out is the date of the primary of the caucus, and then in the brackets, the first number is the total number of delegates of that day. The second number is a running total of all of the delegates that have been awarded through that day. So that you can see.
Can I get one? They said that they are unable to turn up.
Okay. Yeah.
I think the blinds will help.
I think, yeah, I can already feel it a little bit.
Yeah.
So the Democratic Party carves out February. They're in the convention, in the delegate selection plan, there are 3 time periods. There's February, March through the end of May, and then May and June. February is the carve out for the first 4 that help, to focus, allow candidates to focus their time there. Based off demographics, it used to be kind of New Hampshire and Iowa and then everybody else. But the party decided several years ago to try and address diversity issues because Iowa and New Hampshire are so white, to look at other states. So you will see out of, through South Carolina, 193 delegates will be awarded in the first 4. Then March 3rd, which is the next big date, Super Tuesday, 1,500 delegates, over 1,500 delegates will be up for grabs that day. Now, when California moved up their primary, it threw a bit of a wrench in that first 4. Because of their early voting laws in California, the current law is that their mail ballots, their absentee ballots, get mailed out like January 31st, February 1st. So people in California will be receiving their ballots before Iowa caucuses. And there's been, you can talk to all number of people who follow this process. There's, and I'll share some information with some resources that if you want to keep following how this plays out. We think that it is not, New Hampshire does not appreciate this fact because they're the first primary. So as you can see, we'll roll through all of these states. I only specified ones that were caucuses with caucus. Everything else is a primary. Just because there's, I'm sorry?
What's the difference between a caucus and a
Okay.
caucus?
A primary is run by the government body. It's run by the county, the state. It's an official administration. A caucus is run by a party. And it can be, which makes it easier for them to move the date because they're not dependent on a government resource or legislation changing for it to happen. That's why in 2008, I think the Iowa caucus moved 3 different times. It kept moving up earlier and earlier and earlier till January 3rd in 2008.
And so the DNC will decide strategically if they
No,
will decide?
each state makes up their own decision as to whether or not they have a primary or a caucus. The DNC doesn't have a say in that at all. The DNC can set up incentives for a state party to move to a primary, and they have, because they are generally more democratic in participation. In a caucus, the Iowa caucus, prior to this year, you could not participate remotely or absentee. You had to show up on caucus day and stay at your caucus site for possibly several hours to have your vote considered.
Which is baloney.
Yeah, and caucuses have long been argued that they disenfranchise people who do shift work who parents who don't, can't afford childcare, because then also you're pulling those who have childcare needs, who are going to serve that as that childcare away from the caucus. Yes.
So just to back up, someone's asking what's the difference. The main difference is that a primary is like a regular election day where you go and vote at your polling place, but a caucus is like an evening meeting that you have to go to the state.
Or, yeah.
That's the difference of voter.
Yeah.
And to reiterate real quick again, it's based on the state.
Yes.
It is not a national governing body of any
Yeah.
type. It is
The
a state.
DNC can offer incentives, say you can get a bonus 5 delegates for your state, at-large delegates, if you choose to do a primary instead of a caucus.
Would the DNC prefer, right? I'm trying to.
I believe so.
Yeah.
I believe so. Yes.
Just-
I mean, caucuses tend to get the people who are the most fired up and often are onto like the edge of the party. I mean,
I don't know if I would say edge of the
No,
party,
I mean,
but it's definitely geared towards those who are most enthusiastic.
Like-
And yes,
it's only toward people who are,
activists who
Yeah.
are engaged, who are willing to take several hours out of their life on a weeknight or a Saturday morning or a Sunday morning, because I think some of the caucuses are on weekends, and commit themselves to participating in the process that way.
but I mean, the thing is like primary voters tend to look more like general election voters. People
Yes.
who maybe haven't been following it as closely, but are like, yeah, I like this person, as opposed to caucus participants who tend to be
More engaged.
more engaged and, for a number of reasons, I'm not voter shaming, don't tend to look as much like general election voters.
I think that would be fair to say. So you'll see, back to the calendar, we roll through March. Illinois is March 17th. Wyoming, you'll see there's a question mark. They have committed to having their caucus in March. They have not set a date yet. And again, that's one of the features of a party-run caucus, is that they still have time to set their date because it is organized differently. We roll through all the way through June and Washington, D.C. The date not set yet, though, you'll see there at the bottom. Georgia will have their primary in March. The Secretary of State has a window of which to set that primary. They just have a date, but they don't have to set it yet. It will be in March. We just don't know when, because the Secretary of State hasn't made the decision. They usually don't until mid-summer of this year.
Normally they're at Super Tuesday state.
Yes, they have been in the past. Although given the nature of how crowded it already is, it's who knows.
They all could be Super Tuesdays.
So, and then you'll also see New York in that very last section. New York, and we can have this discussion later, has very, very peculiar election laws. Their presidential primary is set for February 4th by statute, which is in violation and has been in violation of the DNC early state for some time now. What they do is they pass a law that is a 9-month law. They pass a law that then it will expire in 9 months to change their primary date to another date for that year for the presidential primary, and then they have their presidential primary, and then once that law expires, next time around, hey, look, their primary is back in the first week of February, and they have to consider whether or not they're going to change it again. Again, New York's weird. So that is the big primary, and one of the things to consider is how this will affect presidential campaigns, is thinking about the big cities that are in all of those states, particularly Super Tuesday, and how expensive it is going to be for candidates to campaign and work there. That will change dramatically between now and probably late fall, who is still in this race. Because you have on Super Tuesday, the California markets, you have Colorado, Denver, Massachusetts, which is Boston, one of the larger media markets, Texas, Virginia, which will be DC, the DC market as well, and Minnesota. So you have a number of large states with large media markets where you can do in some of those states like Minnesota and Virginia do organize retail politics, knocking doors and all of that, but in a state like California, that's going to be hard to do when we're also trying to compete everywhere else. So, now, on to the Illinois delegate process. Yes.
It sounded like you were about to say something about before this year you couldn't participate in the caucus unless you were physically present.
Iowa has proposed, I don't know if they have finalized this yet.
And this is just Iowa.
This is just Iowa. A remote or almost absentee caucus process. Yes-ish. Yes-ish. It's still in process of being finalized. It will make it more, the caucus process more accessible. What I have not seen yet is how they address the issue of when a candidate doesn't meet the threshold for winning delegates and their caucus attendees reapportion out to another candidate. And we can talk about how the technical process of a caucus works at the end, because I hopefully built in some time that we can do that if you want. My sister and I went to Iowa in 2008 and worked a caucus room for Obama, and it was fascinating. I'm so glad I got to do it, but I totally agree that it limits participation. And I think in ways that I don't think is good. But it does still have its benefits. It makes it real easy for candidates in Iowa to see a lot of voters. I spoke with someone at a door who said, I'm not sure about Hillary yet. I've only seen her speak 3 times, and my jaw hit the floor. I'm like, there are people who will, in states, who will only ever see a candidate once if they're lucky, in person. And she says, I'm not sure yet, I've only seen them 3 times.
How many staff people do we know that are already on the ground in Iowa?
Several.
Yeah.
Yes.
Across the board. Like,
Well, I mean,
we have friends that are-
Obama had staff on the ground at this point in 2007.
that are- Yeah, they're permanent staff, like people who have moved to Iowa for
Yeah,
their.
they've been hired ever since.
Campaign has had people, for a couple months, and a lot of people, like a
Yeah.
lot, too.
No, yeah, they're staffing.
And according to Iowa's starting line, who's kind of the guy on the ground, Cory Booker has the best Iowa staff.
Yeah.
So, just keep that in mind as you're looking down.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Best by what measure?
Who the best Iowa operatives are,
Based off experience, past performance, who has worked in Iowa caucus, and
based on who the good Iowa operatives are.
There are people that specialize professionally.
In that work
caucus.
environment. Their life.
Yeah. That's all they do.
as like we talked about, organizing a caucus turnout is a lot different than doing a get out the vote in really any other state.
And Iowa, poor John Delaney has had staff on the ground in Iowa for
A year.
2 years.
Yeah, it's probably closer to 2, yeah.
And so, I'm still, so what that means is these people who are considered the best operatives in Iowa, what that means, they're effective at getting voters to turn out for the candidate.
They know how to move Iowa voters. They know how to talk to Iowa voters. They know how to organize in Iowa.
How to get delegates.
Because it is Iowans really, really pride themselves on their caucus.
And
so
being
they,
a deliberative screener for the rest of
and
the
they take
country.
that very seriously, so they really grill the candidates.
And
they,
I spoke to a guy who got out of the semi and was talking to me, and he was in his gear talking to me about the Comptroller General of the United States, and I was going, I didn't even know we had a Comptroller General.
Wow.
And it's like they are informed. We mock them when we're, those who aren't in Iowa mock them and mock the process. But I will say this: they are the voters I spoke to, the caucus voters I spoke to, were very informed and very engaged, And I think.
They take it seriously.
They do, they take it seriously.
And New Hampshire as well, they, you know, people in New Hampshire do not decide who to vote for until they've met each of them a couple of times and talk to them intensively about issues. Both New Hampshire and Iowa take the process incredibly seriously, and you gotta hand it to them. I mean, for two of the, you know, smaller population states, they've done a pretty good job in years past.
Yeah.
Well, I'm gonna just put it out there, good for them, but too bad they're super white.
Yeah, they elect them in Rocco Valley.
Yeah.
I think
I think
every state got the first.
A long time ago, I heard that in 2008, Kucinich wasn't getting enough votes. So he gave his votes to Barack Obama, and that pushed him over.
No. We're about to get back to that 15% number that I mentioned earlier, which is a small number but has a big impact in the process. So the Illinois process for selecting delegates is each state has to submit a plan to the Democratic Party for approval. Illinois creates a draft plan, we send it in, the DNC says, that looks good, do your feedback from the people, from the voters in Illinois, and then you can approve it and resubmit it. That's what they did, and a couple weeks ago, the State Central Committee of Illinois, Democratic Party, approved our final plan and has sent it off to the DNC for final approval. It is all likelihood going to be approved. I read through it a couple times, and there's nothing that, from an accessibility standpoint, from an inclusion, from an equity standpoint, that looking at it, I found reason that the DNC would push back. In fact, I think Illinois' inclusion goals that they have set are aggressive, and they have admitted are beyond the goals that the DNC is looking for.
When do we get to see this plan?
I'll post it in the event thing, but the Democratic Party of Illinois has posted it on their website. If you go to
And so it's Illinois inclusion plan, right?
well, it's a delegate selection plan.
Oh, got that.
Just oddly, in Illinois, we sometimes don't think we're always the most inclusive, but our delegate selection plan has exceeded the goals of the Democratic Party at least since 1992.
Yes. We have generally been one of the more diverse delegations in the convention. So the Democratic Party of Illinois sends a plan, we set a plan. Then in the fall, candidates for pretty much every office in Illinois circulate petitions. I believe it starts at about August. We'll start circulating their petitions for the March primary.
Just like every other candidate.
Yep.
They're just
But candidates for president and candidates who want to be delegates don't start circulating petitions until October, because their filing date to turn in petitions is much later than everybody else. So candidates for delegate will file their petitions in Springfield January 6th to 9th. It's a 3-day window. You turn in their petitions, you will, and we get back to candidates reviewing. Campaigns will recruit slates and lists of delegates to appear on the ballot for them. You can run independently as yourself, collect your own signatures and get your own name on the ballot supporting your candidate. However, once you turn in those petitions, the candidate and their campaign is given a list of everybody who is running for that. Mariana, if you decide you're going to be supporting Elizabeth Warren and you want to be a delegate, you go out on your own and you get 500 signatures and get on the ballot for your congressional district to be an Elizabeth Warren delegate. On January 10th, Democratic Party of Illinois sends to the Elizabeth Warren campaign a list of everybody who filed, you included, and says, do you want these people to be on the ballot as a delegate for you? And the campaigns have the ability to strike your name if you are not part of if they don't want you to be on the ballot. So that is the first part of this. The candidates, yes.
do you mind if we talk practically
Yes.
for a minute?
Yes.
And I don't mean to hijack, but practically, there will be probably still at least 10 or 12 candidates in the race by October.
Yes.
They will be desperately seeking delegate candidates in each of the congressional districts. Because, for example, in the
Seventh, it's 8.
there's 8 delegates now?
Yeah. 4 men, 4 women.
That means each campaign is going to be looking for 8 candidates. That means there's going to be 80 delegate candidates from the 7th congressional district.
On the ballot.
That's a lot of people, and having recruited delegate candidates several times, especially like downstate, if you have anybody that you know that's a Democrat downstate, tell them to run for delegate, because candidates are going to be desperate to find 3 delegates in Mount Vernon for that congressional district. And slating a full slate of delegates, which means that you have candidates, delegate candidates in each congressional district, is a big organizational task that campaigns will want to accomplish, but not all of them will be able to accomplish it. But if you want to run for delegate, pick a candidate. There's anybody that you want, any issue you care about, there's great candidates out there. Pick a candidate, get in touch with them today.
Yeah.
They will say, you're crazy, this is way too early, we don't know what you're talking about, but keep
Get in touch. Yeah, that was going to be my point at the end. Is
Sorry.
get involved now. If you know someone you're going to be supporting, if you think you're going to be supporting them, get involved with them somehow locally. Raise money for them. Organize a fundraiser. Give money yourself. It is a good way to get on their list and to get noticed of your level of commitment to that candidate, and makes you more likely to be picked as a delegate. I don't think they sit there and count dollars. I've never been in that room, but it makes you more noticeable and gets your name across people's screens and their desks more often, and makes you more likely to, if you are in rooms with these people at fundraisers, if you are in rooms with them at discussions, at organizing events, it makes you more likely to be, but yes.
volunteer hours are honestly
A big,
pretty much more important.
because the thing I was going to get to in a minute was, you're on the hook for all of your expenses at convention. The Democratic Party of Illinois and your candidate don't cover anything. You're on the hook for your hotel and your travel.
But will they book the hotels that we have there?
There will be a block of rooms at your delegation hotel.
You
But-
don't have to stay at home with them though, because.
You don't.
We're close to, I know.
You correct. You do not have to stay at there, but I talked about before, I don't know if you were here for it, every morning there is a delegation breakfast meeting where they distribute their credentials. And it's usually at like 8 o'clock in the morning, where they have a breakfast and they have speakers and they get you credentials which allow you access to the convention center on the floor. So there is an incentive to staying with the delegation. You don't have to, but I would also say if Charlotte was any gauge of how chaotic it is, it was difficult getting around on foot in closed off streets around the convention center. I can't imagine trying to drive within a mile and a half of where the convention center was. Just because of security and everything else like this. I would say,
So I know the whole area. So
Right.
The perimeter is going to be farther out this year too than it's been in past years.
I believe that would be. Yes.
So back to delegate selection. So if you decide, let's say for example that you want to work with an extreme long shot. Like let's say I want to be a candidate for a delegate for Marianne Williamson, so let's imagine then though that after Iowa or after New Hampshire she's dropped out. Then can I go and talk to Kamala Harris and say, hey, second year, I'm out?
You might still get elected. If you have campaigned enough, you as a delegate could conceivably get elected without your person.
I'll get to that in a second. I'll get to that in a second. We're going to get back to it. Comes back to that 15%.
So are there any rules as far as like if you work on the campaign as staff, can you also run as a delegate?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. So candidates for delegate file that first week of January. The campaigns approve everybody who filed. Educating this point, I've never heard of someone not getting approved. I think in 2012, there was somebody on the south side, an alderman, who was not happy that they didn't get picked by the campaign to be part of the official slate of delegates and ran on their own. The Obama campaign said, okay, just let them be. They were like, it wasn't a fight worth having. It wasn't a fight worth picking. And they're gonna have, honestly, I mean, technically they have the ability to do this. And for the elected delegates, it's not a fight that most of them are going to want to have or pick with anybody about it. It's just not worth it. Then our election happens March 17th, and here's the 15%. This is where math gets fun. So, I'll just use the 7th because we have a nice round number of 8 delegates. In the 7th congressional, 4 men, 4 women.
Self-identified, right?
So, as self-identified. We have our primary. And
Each district has 8?
no, each district has a different number, and I have a table I can show in the packet that will have a breakdown of how many each congressional district gets.
Okay.
There are 101 congressional districts, yes.
Are there still a certain number that the campaigns pick in addition to the?
Those are the leaders, the party leaders and elected officials and at large that come in the convention, the state convention meeting in April.
Yeah.
That's in the next step of the process. So ignoring for the moment how everybody does in the state, let's say, and just in our congressional district, in CD 7, we'll just say Elizabeth Warren gets 40%. We'll say
40% of
the vote in the primary.
In that district.
And yes, just our congressional district.
And this is the primary vote, this is not the delegate vote.
Correct.
Okay.
Um,
I know, there's.
Joe Biden gets 25. We'll say Mayor Pete gets 16. Where are we at? 65, 81, and then
Harris.
yeah, we'll say Senator Harris gets 9, and then everybody else below that.
Okay, you completely left out.
I'm sorry. You're right. Okay, you're fair enough.
It's okay.
Bernie gets 8.
Well, we know.
I'm sure the math is everybody else is that way, less than 1%. So where the 15% comes in is that a candidate, in order to get any delegates from our congressional district, has to get at least 15%. So the only people from the 7th congressional in this scenario are these 3. And it's proportioned by their numbers. So Senator Warren would get the most delegates, then Vice President Biden, and then Mayor Pete, and everybody else would get none. Even if somebody got 14% in there, nobody else gets it. You have to get at least 15% in your congressional district to get any delegates out of your congressional district.
That's nationwide.
Generally, some states can change it, but I believe I'll have to double check in the DNC document. But I think it's kind of it's the norm. I want to say Massachusetts was looking at lowering it because of the number of people in the field, but I think most states are going to go with 15. 15 is also the number for statewide delegates, which is why most states also use it on the congressional level, because it's for uniformity.
Are there any Democratic states that do winner take all, or is that Republicans only? Okay.
We used to do winner take all, and then 1984 happened, and Reverend Jesse Jackson won 3 states. And as a after effect of that, which is they changed to proportional awarding of delegates after 1984, I believe, was the year, which is so.
So that was an effort to blunt Jackson's insurgent campaign.
No, actually, it was a similar to open the door because it was to other candidates for the possibility. Because his states were a little bit later in the process, and he did significantly well in other states. That actually, if it was proportional, he would have had more delegates.
I see.
It was a reform for the better.
He would have had delegates here in Illinois, for example.
Yes,
Okay.
he would have had more delegates if that had been in the place in '84.
And he got locked out of those other states because the winner took all and he got nothing.
Exactly.
Okay.
And he turned out to be oh crap, he was kind of viable. He won 3 states outright.
Yeah,
Right.
and I would say both in terms of cultural within the party of a black man doing that well in a presidential nomination process, and the reform to proportional award change to proportional awarding of delegates opened the door for the Obama campaign to be successful in the way it was. You know, there's many other factors, but those I don't know how Obama could have been successful without proportional awarding of delegates. I mean, just California alone. I mean, that was a big one. So that's the story here. Looking at our congressional district as to how it breaks down. So that's where that 15% comes in. Is that and that's to your question about Marianne Williamson. You can be on the delegate for, even if she drops out, if she gets 15% in your congressional district, and you are the top vote getter of her list of delegates, you can be a delegate, even if she's dropped out.
In fact, that happened in 1992. Paul Tsongas had dropped out, but he got 30% of the vote in a lot of congressional districts. So it ended up that even when we went to convention, even though Tsongas was not still an active candidate,
Mm-hmm.
we had 50 Tsongas delegates from Illinois and 100 Clinton delegates from Illinois.
And were they pledged to still vote for
We were
Tsongas?
pledged to still vote, and then at the convention, there were some Jerry Brown delegates, because Jerry Brown was still active, and Tsongas delegates, and there were,
Deals.
machinations and communications, and first round voting and second round voting, and
Yeah.
then they all came
There-
together. And in fact, like, Bob Kerry was in pretty long, and all the Kerry delegates came and endorsed Tsongas.
Yeah.
So, like, things can happen.
Yeah, there's a lot of moving pieces, and it's back to the point where that. So we get our congressional. I don't know what the math would be on this, but these 3 would get delegates out of our congressional district. Yes.
Okay, so it's nice if everybody would like just get numbers that are easily divisible by 8.
Yeah.
But, like, what happens if, okay, here you've got 3 people who have 81% of the vote. So
Yeah.
I guess you sort of like turn that into 100 and then,
Yeah.
of course, you're putting but what happens if you have like more than 1 delegate, fewer than 2?
There's a percentage cutoff. I want to say it's. There is math in the Illinois delegation selection plan of how that gets broken out depending on where they are in percentages and in the decimal points. There is a cutoff, and I don't remember what it is. I want to say it's like 1.495 or something like that.
And what happens if people who are voting for 1 delegate vote all women, and then how
There's a process for once you have a number of delegates that say Senator Warren is going to get 5, just guessing, of the delegates. The top vote getter of all of her 8 delegate candidates becomes the first delegate. The next one is the top vote getter of the other gender, in order to maintain parity between the genders. So it'll be, if the top vote getter is a man, it'll be 3 and 2. If it's a top vote getter is a woman, it'll be 3 and 2. But the delegates are targeted towards gender equity.
And in a race that has Biden and Bernie, how do you arrange for racial diversity?
There are goals in the Illinois in the delegate selection plan, and the candidates are encouraged to find their delegates that
It's not encouraged, it's you must.
you must. They are, but I say they are goals and not requirements or quotas. They are required to make every effort to meet these affirmative action goals, and there's a whole process for it, and there's going to be a process of outreach and from the party.
And different diversity criteria as
Yes,
well, right?
yeah, and there's a table of that I can share as well.
So I gotta back up to a very basic question that's confusing me this whole time.
Uh-huh.
Because as a voter, I don't recall ever having cast a vote for the name of any delegate. So what do you?
They're there.
Yeah, you may have.
There's the candidate, and then lower on the ballot, there's the list of all of the delegates, and it's their name. Like in 2012, it was Matt Fruth, Barack Obama, delegate for Barack Obama. Yeah, it's a whole block.
It's a voting contest vote, right, Matt?
Yeah,
And
yeah.
then the delegates are all the same order?
They're all together. They're all together. It's one giant list. So you can actually vote for a delegate from multiple candidates. You can only vote for one person for president, but you can vote for you will have 8 votes in our congressional district. There will be I can cast 8 votes across the delegates. I can give 2 votes to Warren. I can give 2 votes to Booker, 2 to Harris. I can break them out however I want. I don't have to vote for all of them. Yeah, it is not an automatic. My vote for president does not automatically commit my delegate votes to that, and I can undervote if I want to make sure that this black woman and this gay Hispanic man get to be delegates for Kamala Harris. I can vote for just those 2, and leave my other 6 delegate votes unused.
So if your friend's running,
Yeah.
Why? Wait. So does that then weight those 2 persons 4 times?
It's just a total vote count.
And they're each listed in you.
It's a total vote count. So yeah, it's not. My 2 votes aren't weighted, but it's just it's when you're dealing with multiple candidate math. If you want to make sure that some people get in, it's better to undervote.
Are most voters this savvy and honest?
No.
Really?
No.
This is
Unless they
like-
know someone on the ballot, I would say no.
Can I
So
have,
I would like to get back to the process real quick. I mean, we can have some time because we're so the election happens. We award our delegates out of the congressional district in April. All of the there's a meeting in Springfield at a hotel or a Democratic Party office for the state party office on April 27th is the date they have set so far. And not that I've memorized it. All of the congressional delegates will gather, or those who can attend will gather to vote on the other 80, no, not 83, it says, all of the other delegates for the state of Illinois.
83?
It's not 83. We get 83 other delegates, but some of those are the super delegates.
Oh.
Let me see if I can pull it up. So,
54. You said
Yeah.
there were 29 super delegates.
yeah. So yeah, there are 20 party leader and elected official delegates and 34 at-large delegates. What will happen is the party leader and elected official delegates are also pledged delegates. They have to, at some point in January or February, submit a piece of paper to an application to the state party and say, I would like to be a party leader pledged delegate for Mayor Pete, for Kamala Harris, or whoever. And the state party takes all of this in, they send it off to the various campaigns for approval. And this is one where the campaigns will prioritize some folks over others, this and the at-large things, because unlike the elected ones where they're scrambling to people, there's only 20 elected official ones, so they can be a little bit more discerning. But this will be folks like Lori Lightfoot, Mayor Lightfoot, Treasurer Frericks, John Collerton, who's the Senate President, other members of our state assembly
Lieutenant Governor,
who will be, what?
Lieutenant Governor.
Lieutenant Governor, very likely. Yeah, Juliana Shredder will almost surely, I would be surprised if she wasn't selected as an elected leader one. If she doesn't run as a pledge delegate. Then all of the congressional district delegates will vote on that list. Now that group will be broken off by what is the statewide percentage result of the presidential vote. So if whoever makes over 15% statewide will get delegates out of this group, but it will be proportional based off of their turnout as well, similar to the congressional level, but it can be different than this. So then once that group is picked, they pick the at-large. Now the at-large is a group of anybody else. This could be the head of Chicago Federation of Labor. It could be the union leaders, downstate state reps, community activists, any number of folks. This group is also broken down based off of statewide percentage. And this group is also the last chance that the state party has to meet diversity and equity inclusion goals. This is one where they really look at demographic information and for inclusion. So this is where they really look at that, and they look at that information, because it is a chance for them to really kind of make sure that we have a diverse delegation going there. So that's on April 27th. And then we have our delegation. There's also alternate delegates, and Illinois has 13, and those are also picked that day as alternates. And they do not get counted towards our diversity and inclusion goals. They're viewed as a separate group. That group should also be diverse on demographic issues, but it's not. We can't use the alternates to pick 13 gay and lesbian transgender folks to accommodate the fact that none of the other delegates are. We can't say, here, you get to also come along and say you get to check our boxes for these areas. They are considered for diversity and inclusion separate from the rest of the delegation. Yeah.
For alternates, are they allowed to participate in all of the things that the delegates participate in except for voting?
Yes.
So like they have access to the floor and all the meetings and.
Yes.
So you're looking for a good way to be involved, but you don't get to be
that or a page, which is kind of consistent to the delegation.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, the alternates.
The platform
Process.
rules committees.
Yes.
Because those are good.
Yes, those are also ways to participate as well. Now, I said earlier that the total number of delegates will be this right now. Nationally. Let's say in Illinois we have 184. Lauren Underwood, who is one of our superdelegates, decides she would like to run as a pledge delegate and cast a ballot on the first vote. Well, if she gets elected as a pledge delegate, we no longer have 184 delegates for Illinois. We get 183. And superdelegates do not get replaced. If they can run as a pledge delegate, this is the first time that they've included this because the superdelegates don't get to vote on the first ballot. They can run as a pledge delegate. However, the state loses a vote. So while it is technically possible, it is not probably going to happen because it diminishes the voice of the state. And not that many people are going to be checking, doing that math their next election in a primary, but it doesn't make sense. If you want to make sure that Illinois has a voice in the process, why diminish the voice?
And congressional people, sitting members of Congress are automatically superdelegates.
Yes, they are. As are senators, governors, Democratic governors. So J.B. Pritzker is a superdelegate. Now we have on April 27th, we have all of that. We have our delegation set. We also will set our participation in the 3 committees that I mentioned earlier: rules, platform, and credentials. Illinois gets to send 7 people to participate in each of those committees. So we get to send 21 representatives from Illinois to participate in those committees. And those folks don't have to be delegates. 21 total. So 7 for each committee. And those should also be balanced by gender. So it'll be 4 and 3, depending, and there'll probably be one committee that is 4-3 men and 2 that are 4-3 women. I'm not sure how that process will be selected. So that is another opportunity to participate in the process.
In the past, the different campaigns got input into who
Yes.
those people were. Do you know if that's?
That is in the plan, is that in the DNC called the convention, it does say that to the best efforts, our representatives to those committees should reflect how the state voted for presidential candidates. So, whoever got the most votes in Illinois will have, 3 people, and then, 3 of their supporters on each of these things, on each of those committees. So that's how that, then the committees will meet virtually and in person, develop a platform. The rules committee will set the rules for the convention, how to operate the convention, which will probably be very, very similar with a few date changes from how it operated in 2016. And they will also the rules committee also makes recommendations for who will be the DNC, the convention chair and other officers. The credentials committee will review all of the delegates from all of the states and make sure that they are inclusive and diverse, and will also administer any challenges that arise from a state. If someone from the state of Ohio thinks that the state party did not adhere to their goals or their best efforts to be inclusive, they can raise a challenge to the credentials committee to have the delegation challenged and have different people seated. So.
One group we didn't talk about is people who are not currently elected, but who win Democratic nominees after the primary. Are they generally put into the at-large group, or is it?
The question is, what happens with people who win primaries in those elections? That's up to that meeting of the congressional delegation, the congressional district delegates, as to how they're going to vote. There will be, the candidates will give their feedback as to who, after the paperwork is submitted, there will be a process. The candidates the presidential candidates will review and say, here's the people we would like, or we're okay with. In 2012, it was different because there was only one candidate, but generally what I would imagine happen is there will be a list presented at the meeting from the state party of, here are, in consultation with the candidates, here's our list of recommendations for the party leader and elected official candidates, and then here's our list of recommendations for the at-large. And they'll be moved and seconded and voted on.
I'm sorry, can you just remind me, because there's been a lot of information.
Oh, sure.
Equity goals, I should have brought a notebook. My bad. But the equity goals, is that a goal or a mandate? So
It's a goal.
Okay, so there's no sanction if a state fails to meet.
No,
They're pretty enforced.
they have become more enforced in recent years.
I remember having to tell Billy Marovitz he couldn't be a delegate, but Christy Hefner could be a delegate. So, I mean, they're pretty.
No, they definitely want it. So I would say that. So we have now these numbers will not add up to 184. It will add up to more than that. So just bear with me. The diversity goals for I'll say the DNC is very specific to not refer to them as quotas. They operate as quotas by and large, but they very specifically say that these are not to be thought of as quotas. They are set to be goals. So Illinois' goals for our delegation: African Americans 51, Hispanics 35, Native Americans 1, Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders 12, LGBTQ Americans, LGBTQ plus Americans 12, people with disabilities 24, youth, which is defined as 36 and younger, 63. So, yes, Mr. Lee.
I will tell you this, to go back to bail, as we work on the convention, we're always very concerned about what the crowd looks like, because it's a TV show. And so, we want to make sure the camera goes out there, it doesn't look like a Republican convention to see a white fat guy.
And obviously, one person could check off 4 of those boxes.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Yeah. And that was exactly what I was going to say next. Was you could have someone who is African American, Hispanic, gay, and with a disability, and 35, and 35 who would count as one of all of those boxes. So it is possible to have multiple representations in those diversities. So those are included. They are specified in our delegate selection plan.
That's why they add up to more than 100.
Yes, is that people can be, well, because often people are more than one thing.
Yeah, Lori Lightfoot, for example.
Yes, exactly.
And is it, yeah, it's 50-50 breakdown of gender generally as well?
Yes, that's why gender was not one of those categories, is because our plan is but per DNC is that there is the equal division between the genders. And I will note that, I don't know if it, because I couldn't find from 4 years ago, in the DNC called to convention and in the Illinois delegation plan, it specifies that non-binary people who identify as non-binary, will not be counted in either male or female towards those counts. So those counts people who identify as non-binary are not forced to be counted in either the male or female for the balance. So there is the first time I don't remember seeing that 4 years ago in terms of that level of inclusion, and I think it is, again, towards our representation and our goals of making sure that every voice and face is
If we're
present.
doing the party of inclusion, then let's be inclusive.
I'm curious if there's no category for, I guess you couldn't be for religion, because technically church and state, but
Well,
not
we're
for-
the party. This is a party process, not a government process.
But still.
Still, it would.
Well,
it would
anyway, but there's nothing
for
for
religious
country of
representation.
origin or being children of immigrants or first language spoken or any of those sorts of things.
Correct.
Do they have a Hispanic
Yeah.
American?
Yes.
Did I miss that?
Yeah,
35.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And those numbers are based off of the percentage of the population present in Illinois. The Illinois used the Illinois demographic information from the census tracts to create those as the basis for those numbers. So those are not some pulled out of thin air. They looked at what is the population of Illinois.
So the delegation should be from the state.
Well, I think it is based off of our Democratic voters.
Right.
Democratic voters, which is why youth is so high, is because especially out of the 2018 election, had a big impact on that.
And I think that is a change from years past, so I think that's gonna be something that's gonna affect the campaigns when they're looking for delegate candidates. That quota that's up, I think even the notion of youth is.
Oh yeah, it's definitely higher than it has been in past elections. I got in as a youth delegate, and our numbers were not. I think in 2012 the goal was like 15.
Wow. So 65 and 15.
Yeah, I think it may have been a little bit higher, but I think in 12 I think the target was in the teens. I don't think it was nowhere near 60.
And the minimum age is 18.
Yes, and you have to be 18 by the November election. So you could actually be 17 and be a delegate to the convention, as long as you are 18 by the election. And in Illinois, you can't be 17 and vote in the primary if you will be 18 by the November election. Because even though it's government run, it is technically a party process. You are determining a party representation and not a straight up the elected official. So that kind of runs through it.
And what about in Illinois? What about felons? Because they're allowed to vote. Are they allowed to be delegates?
That is, I don't know. That's not addressed in the, I haven't seen a reference to that in the plan. It is, in Illinois, once you have completed your sentence, your rights are restored to you. If you are a felon, if you are serving misdemeanor, I think you retain your voting rights. It's only if you've been convicted of a felony.
But you can vote if you go re-register.
No, your rights, your registration should be automatically restored
Oh,
upon
that's
release.
fairly.
Mhm.
We had
No.
this whole thing where we had to tell people to re-register at Cook County Jail.
If they've moved or stuff like that. But I was working with a state senate candidate in 2012, and we were dealing, and we had some folks who were out and their registration was still alive, but they went back to the same address after they got out.
Right. Okay.
So if you have a new address, you need to re-register. So that may have been the case there. I don't know what the specifics were, but if you're returning to the same address, your registration should automatically be restored to that address. Yes.
So, I have two kind of different questions. So first of all, can you talk a little bit about the rationale of having this two-tiered system, what you refer to as the beauty pageant, versus having to put together a slate to
do all of it.
the direct election of delegates, because that seems like a lot of work. I mean, I'm not.
It is a lot of work.
It is a lot of work, but I'll say this: Virginia's process is even more work than ours. Not to defend ours, I have friends all over the country by virtue of my being involved in the Young Democrats of America, and we've compared delegate plans. Virginia, it's a flow chart. The Virginia requires a flow chart.
Okay.
I mean, technically, you could use a flow chart for ours, but theirs, I'm like,
You need it.
And don't some of the states, you have to be elected locally, then you have to go to the county convention.
yeah.
you have to
And
go
often
to the
with
state
specifically with caucuses, that's the other downside of the caucuses is problem with the caucuses, like in the room in Iowa, you're picking representative. You're not picking who the delegate is. You're picking the representative to the county convention, who then picks delegates to the state convention, who then picks the delegates. There's a lot. Here's the thing: is like the DNC. If the DNC controlled this, it'd be a lot simpler and a lot more controlled. It is, and that's why it's like we have 57 delegate selection processes in the Democratic Party, and the Northern Mariana Islands is a recent addition. They're the most recent. So I think in 2016, I don't know. I can't. Yeah, they were in 2016, but in 2012 and 2008 it was 56. So we have 57 processes. So you have, as a candidate, not only do you have to have staff at a national level to do your math as to what is your delegate plan nationwide, you need up to, some people may, you might be able to tag, you have one person who handles Guam, Virgin Islands, the Democrats abroad and all the rest of it. But you need at least one, if not multiple people handling your delegate process in California. You need one or two people in Illinois to manage the process here, on top of all of your other field staff. So that creates a strategy and a staffing and a money issue that is separate than everything else.
That was my question, because I get the idea that doing the groundwork is good for winning periods, so you want to encourage candidates to do groundwork at that granular level, but it just feels like surely this adds unnecessarily to the cost of being a candidate.
It's a serious thing to be president. You haven't even talked about ballot access.
Yeah, that's a whole.
Each state has.
Yeah.
What happens if a candidate is lazy or is putting their resources in another place? They wind up, you only put one pledged delegate on the ballot, and in the 7th, for example, and then
They
they
qualify.
catch fire and they get 60% of the vote.
It's fun, that's the fun.
Yeah, there is contingent language in the plan for what can happen if they qualify for more delegates than are on the ballot. And
With those,
If I can tell the
Yeah,
story,
yeah, please.
Yeah, in 1992, that's exactly what happened. When Clinton was very popular and had come to Illinois early and kind of sucked up all the elected officials and all the official party people. So I was running this August campaign and we were, baling wire, gum, anything that we could find and put it together. So in some congressional districts, I wasn't able to get enough, to fully slate the delegate places, but then we won. So then I got to choose and appoint who my delegate was going to be.
but are they then pledged?
Yeah, they go as a Saugus delegate, or they would go as a, I don't know, whoever, Jay Inslee, say Jay Inslee, all of a sudden in February, everyone realizes climate change is a big FT, right? So if Jay Inslee got 40% of the vote, but hadn't had people on the as delegate candidates here, he would get to pick who his delegates would be from the candidate district.
The campaign.
Yeah.
The campaign district. If somebody runs for delegate and gets sick or just decides they
Yeah,
don't.
there is an opportunity to replace pledged delegates.
So here's my other question, something you said is, oh, by the way earlier on in this flood of information, which is that the party, the DNC, they don't pay the candidate, you have to pay, you're on the hook for your own
Yes.
expenses. Has there been any discussion to re-examine that? Because like, that's great that you have all these, equity goals / quotas, but, I mean.
Then you have to pay for it.
Right, so we're just gonna undercut some of that, and so,
Well, I was saying-
can you, is there
Delegates
really?
do fundraisers.
So,
Yeah.
And there's a lot of free meals.
There's a lot of free meals, but the hotels aren't cheap. It's, the hotels aren't cheap. Airfare isn't cheap for people flying.
but could
You could-
couldn't the DNC, for example, execute an agreement with the major candidates that of the millions and millions and millions they're spending, that they're gonna apportion something for a fund to cover the expenses of some of these folks? That's not.
Because I would say then playing the cynical person working on a candidate who's not and doesn't have the most delegates, I would be out there saying, who's the DNC to pick what delegates get help getting their
I'm not gonna pay.
why does the DNC get to pick what delegates get help?
Yeah.
As someone, if I'm on staff for someone who's in third place with the number of delegates, that's the message I'm putting out. Is why does the DNC help that my delegates? It's like yes, I put it all on my credit card when I went to Charlotte. It was expensive, and I raised some money. I got some fun. I did some fundraising for stuff, but the DNC and the candidates are going to be paying for their own staff, hotel rooms, their own staff events, their own parties, it's hard to say, yes, I want to have my delegates and I want to be the nominee, but I also, if I think I'm going to be the nominee, I also need to make sure I have money so I can be putting money into Pennsylvania, Ohio, Florida, Arizona, wherever the votes are going to be that start the campaign that I have to run July 17th.
Wisconsin and Michigan. I just want
Wait,
to.
I thought we don't give you.
They're fine. They're fine.
Yes.
Okay, because our big policy we're selling
Maybe.
go into more about what's involved in being on the platform committee.
The platform committee. I've followed this a little bit in 2012. I didn't follow it really much in 16. But they had 2 meetings in person that allowed remote participation, and I think they also had a number of conference calls. From what I could gather, it was a lot of not starting with a blank page. It was looking at the prior document, looking at legislative issues that had come up over the last 4 years, and looking and discussions and what we wanted to include and add. In 2012, we added gay marriage, the support for gay marriage in the platform. And if you, and I'm sure on some C-SPAN archive, you will see when they moved and seconded it, I was the second. So I made sure, because I knew it was in there, and I had friends, many friends who gay and lesbian, and I was like, I'm gonna be there when we approve that platform. And technically, for parliamentary procedure and merits, the report from the committee is considered the motion. The favorable committee from the report, so it doesn't need a motion. But there was a call for a second, and I was in my chair waiting for it. I don't think he even finished saying, "Is there a second?" And I was like in the 10th row, screaming second, because I was like, "Dang it, I'm gonna get it." So
You're gonna be on the record for this.
so there was that. So that was fun. So they move, and then, but yeah, they have that all documented and proofed out, and there was a bound document the day the platform was approved on all the chairs.
So how do you get involved in that case?
You would, there will be an application, well, I would say, email the state party, the Democrat Party in Illinois, and say, I am interested in participating in this. And if you have a candidate you are thinking about supporting, include that as well, because that candidate preference will be a factor in representation on the committee.
I'm sorry, the committee representation is or is not bound by the equity goals?
No, it's gender. What I have seen is they're looking for gender split, not for
all these other,
not for those other things.
But in theory, if you were meeting your goals for the delegation, you probably have a diverse pool to pull from anything.
Yeah, I mean you can pull. I think in 2012, Senator Kimberly Lightford was one of our representatives to the platform committee, but I don't think she was a delegate.
Okay.
So there are ways to be involved in that, and it is. But so it's. I would say if you want to be involved in that, I would contact the state party. They are probably going to say too early, but I would say talk to them. I would also say
Whatever campaign you think you like, talk to the campaign that you think you like.
yes.
They're gonna need people.
So I have like 3 questions. There's so much information, it's actually hard to focus continuously.
Oh yes.
So I know you've taped this. I totally want to like review it, and a lot of this is out of that
Document,
plan,
and I'll
right?
make sure to share that
So-
with everybody.
So I have access to the plan, but I'd like to review it in combination with
sure.
this. I am on these Winning with Warren calls. My person is Warren. Do you know any contact information in addition? Is there a person?
In Illinois with the Warren campaign? I do not at this point.
Okay.
Get on her app.
Sorry?
She has an app, get on her app.
I have the app.
Okay,
Wait,
there's
quite
a
likely
section for
they
Illinois.
don't have- They might have a volunteer here now, but nobody has staff here yet because they're all only worried about
The early
force,
stages.
the early
Yeah,
states.
the big four.
But they probably have somebody who's done some fundraising for them here. Call, I would be old fashioned and call Boston, call her headquarters and say, I want to be involved in Illinois. Do you have anybody? Oh, you don't? Can I be that person?
Yeah. I do know that there's.
Well, we're already on that stage.
Yeah, I'm going there.
Yeah, I would say look at who are the chairs of some of the fundraisers that have happened for the candidates, and reach out to them, because those are people.
Yeah.
The chairs, the fundraisers, are people in for those candidates. I would say.
And if they're really planning to make it to the convention, because let's be real, there probably are candidates who are in it to send a message, get a platform out, whatever, that they're not actually, planning to get to convention.
Yeah.
So if they're planning to get convention,
De Blasio's gonna run the table. Take that back.
But like the reality is that if they have that long-term strategic plan to get to Milwaukee, they probably are going to have someone or at least an idea of like where Illinois falls in their plan. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Like
Well,
if you call Warren's
Joe Biden
headquarters.
doesn't have any Illinois person yet, just
So, but like, but there is probably somewhere on a paper, like, you don't
No,
think, okay.
so I would say this.
Well,
in a perfect world.
in a perfect
Yes,
world,
in a
but
perfect
it
world.
wouldn't hurt to
Yeah.
reach out to them directly is my point. It's like, if you do have a person, call them. Yeah, like they were saying, just call the headquarters.
And I would just, so we're hitting right about 11 o'clock, so I just want to say, so there is a blog called Front Loading HQ. It's a guy named Josh Putnam. He works he's an academic out of Georgia, I believe, who has been basically he tracks this semi-professionally. He is amazing. I engage with him on Twitter a lot about some of these questions and some of these pieces. He's very smart. He tracks this, and he tracks all the laws that are changing. He had a hashtag that he was using called Invisible Primary during the run-up to all of the announcements of travel that candidates were making to Iowa, New Hampshire, Ohio, Pennsylvania, Florida. He was tracking all of that. He also tracks the big candidate hires in the realm of delegate work, as well as some other pieces. He's a great resource for that. If you really want to get nerd out about this, he's a good Twitter to follow. Front Loading HQ, FHQ on Twitter.
For making this information accessible going forward,
Mhm.
or for those of us who are here and those who, can we have a conversation later about compiling this into a format that would work on putting in the activist toolkit or something like that, so that we can have it as a
Yeah.
as a
The Democratic Party of Illinois, in their plan, actually at the last couple pages, is a really good simplified timeline of a lot of these pieces. That I don't think they did it 4 years ago. I mean, whoever helped put this together did a good job with that piece, in my opinion. I think they broke it down into a more accessible thing than reading through a 40-page document.
The delegate selection.
The delegate selection plan. But I'll probably create a Facebook group around this topic, around just like a non-candidate specific discussion group, and post these documents, and I'll try and condense some of this information into some PDFs, some one-page documents that share as well.
We kind of blew it today, we should have taped you.
It's being taped.
It's being taped.
Oh, great,
So-
that's wonderful.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
And I am, and a few people have reached out to me.
About it until last night, yesterday afternoon.
Yeah. Well, a few people have asked me, contacted me individually who weren't able to make it today to other conflicts, and I've told them that I'd be willing to put on a similar presentation again, either here locally or other places.
So when you have a page, I want you with some of the.
Yeah. And in the Illinois party plan, they do say that they will also do an outreach effort in the fall, which, it's like, which is probably closer than when more people are going to be paying attention, at least in Illinois, to it, because it's going to get more real for us, especially once candidates for every other office start circulating petitions and people start thinking about it. So delegates have to get 500 signatures out of your congressional district. Yeah, that's easy. That's a weekend.
When can we start?
October is that you can't start collecting those signatures until October, but generally what happens is the campaign will put together their slate of folks and send that out to you in like a PDF or a Word document, and you can print at home, or they'll take it to a printer, have it printed, and drop off some for you. And everybody who is a delegate will go out, because all 8 names, if they get 8 names, all 8 names will appear on the petition, like you see for Water Reclamation District or Village Trustee or stuff like that. And if they get 500 signatures, it counts for all 8.
So you can get on the preferred list before you even need to collect your signatures.
Yeah, you should be in with your campaign, because the campaign will kind of vet that list to make sure it is a diverse list for their delegates. They'll send out that sample petition page. They'll either print it for you, or you can send it to you in a PDF, and you print it at home. You go out, you get your signatures, you return it to them. You'll be on the hook for getting 100 signatures. And every other delegate on that list will be on the hook for getting 100 signatures. You won't have to get all 500 if you're part of the list. You just have to get some. You have to contribute to the effort. And then the campaign will drive all of their delegates, delegate petitions to Springfield and turn them in at Springfield.
Is there some kind of goofy, like in Chicago, you could only sign for one candidate to run for mayor, you couldn't sign for anyone else? Are these same kind of rules applicable for signing for delegates? So can a Bernie supporter sign
Usually, I would say yes. Typically, in the petition law is that you cannot sign for more candidates than you can vote for. Like if
Three trustee candidates.
You can't.
Because there's 8 delegates, you can sign 8 times?
No, you can sign one petition. If one petition has all 8 delegates and you sign that one, I believe you're done. But here's the thing though, it's like that those 8 delegates are for one candidate. So in theory, why would you sign the petitions for delegates for a candidate you don't support? Yes.
Has anyone ever challenged signatures for delegates?
Yeah.
Not that I can remember.
Yes.
And,
Jesse Jackson, there was, in '88, there were petition signatures signed in illegibly in green crayon and one of the campaigns.
okay, I'll be fair. I would challenge that one. I would challenge the claim. But I would say this: going back to 2008, when I was helping the Obama campaign, I was sitting in an office in downtown Chicago with Mike Kreloff, collecting and organizing all of these petitions for delegates and his petitions to be on the ballot as the presidential candidate, of which he only needs 3,000. You only need 3,000 to be on the ballot for president. But you need 8,000 for candidate. But that's another story. That's another discussion.
They changed the laws because it used to be between 10, not less than 10, and now more than 25,000.
Yeah, but it's been, but for some time it's between 3,000 and 5,000.
Which is
much better. And I got to make sure that the top page and the bottom page of Obama's petition stack were circulated by Oak Park folks. So,
Can
I ask a question?
No, I don't believe so.
Sir?
Yes,
I don't know your name.
my name's Matt.
Okay, Matt. Did you have a sign-in sheet? Because I really have to go.
No, I did not, but
Were you collecting emails or something?
I was not, but I can.
That would be so awesome.
And I can send out information, some of the documents.
Can a delegate community have a political committee and raise money to defer their expenses?
Yes.
Great.
Yes.
I'm about to become a notary public within the next.
Excellent. I have been one for about a decade, so.
Yeah,
Everyone
and the thing is, if I'm running as a delegate,
Mhm.
can I notarize my own?
You cannot, plus is, you cannot notarize petition sheets that you circulate. If you are the circulator for that sheet, you cannot notarize it, because as a notary, you are certifying that that document was signed in front of you. You cannot certify your own signature.
So I have to certify someone else.
Yes.
So if Julia here has some, I could certify yours.
Yeah, if she passes petitions, you can certify the ones that she circulates. But yeah, you cannot certify your own. You can't notarize your own. But yes, being a notary public is also a good way to help campaigns, because there is never enough, and it's like $45 for 4 years, and you get a fun little stamp. Although I miss the old embossers. Those were the good ones that could press the paper. I think my dad still has his.
Can I put in a plug for another way to help campaigns?
Yes.
And the convention itself?
Yes.
The convention itself is going to need billions of volunteers. There is a convention committee. You can go online and find it. You can probably sign up to be to start being a volunteer now. If you get it on the ground floor, that means you'll get the good volunteer assignments. But, you know, Milwaukee, even if you don't go up and stay there, there's Amtrak trains that go up early enough in the morning. Well, there's not one that comes back late at night, but I feel
We
certain.
have increased, the number of trains going back and forth between Milwaukee and Chicago.
And I was a volunteer in Denver.
Convention.
Yeah,
There
there
will
are,
be a late train. I'm also thinking about, and I'd love to talk to people in Oak Park, because I'm thinking about, putting together like a bus that would go from the Jefferson Park Blue Line up to Milwaukee every day and come back.
Yeah.
So I think that we should think about creative solutions.
Absolutely.
That's much more really from Chicago.
Yeah, and I was a volunteer in Denver, and I was helping with the Obama campaign, hand out credentials, distribute credentials too. And I'll say this, it was kind of fun to say, I'm sorry, former Secretary of the Navy Perry, you can't have a credential today. You're not on the list. That was a trip. But we were there. You know, it's like as when the delegates go home as a volunteer, we were over at the main credential office till like midnight, counting and sorting out our passes that we were going to hand out to non-delegates, because our team was we were handing out hall passes and other seating passes that were not delegate passes. The delegate passes had their own team. We were everybody else.
We're the VIPs.
We were the VIPs, yes. My friend Rob Barron got to give Roland Burris his credentials in Denver. So, which was interesting. You know, it's like as how that turned out. It was we laughed about that after later on, several months later. So, but
I gave Jim Thompson his ballot for 2018.
nice.
I was as election judge. He lives in my precinct.
That's
Okay.
wow.
Could
Well-
you do like 1 minute on what a page is?
Oh, sure. I mentioned that there are. I can't remember how many we get, but there are pages at the convention. They act as aides to the delegation, distributing information, handouts from the convention staff out to the floor to the pages. They're usually college kids or young adults. They're kind of basically interns for the delegation. It's nothing. It's not really glorious or anything, but you get to be on the floor, which is pretty cool.
and talk to the delegates.
And talk. You apply to the state party. The state party sets who the pages are. No. Some
And
folks.
it's good for high school kids, college kids.
Oh yeah,
who are
absolutely.
Interested.
And there was something else. Oh, so just weird thing is as far as convention logistics and distributing information, they run hardline phones to each delegation on the floor. And so, I mean, this is a massive technological undertaking beyond the stage. I mean, the stage is an amazing setup, and it's truly incredible. But they also, every delegation has a walkie-talkie, a cell phone they have a set number of cell phones for all the delegations, and then also a hard line that runs out to the floor for each delegation, so that if they need to contact the stage about something that's going on, or they need assistance with something, or the stage needs to get a delegation, they can do that. And then when it comes time for roll call, every delegation has their own mic for the delegation. So thank you all for coming.
Thanks, Matt.